Dr. Lawrence Krauss is promoting his belief that teaching creationism to children is child abuse. We certainly share his conclusion that teaching lies to children is a form of child abuse. We need to teach kids the truth. But how can you teach truth if you have a way of thinking that can't define truth? Dr. Krauss is an atheist that believes there's no creator God. He then rails against creationists because he declares what we teach is morally wrong. But where do moral laws come from? If you say that each person determines what's right for themselves, then there is no absolute moral law. If you say societies as a whole determine morality, then I guess we could say Hitler was right, couldn't we? That's the argument the Nazis used in the Nuremberg trials, that it was legal in Germany to commit the atrocities they did based on their evolutionary worldview that some races were inferior to others, because their societal laws accepted killing Jews was right. At the time, other people rejected that line of thinking because they said there was a higher law, which really meant God's law, thou shalt not murder. See, in order for there to be a right or wrong, there needs to be an unchanging standard to compare to. As an analogy, if I said, which is more correct, 2 plus 2 equals 5, or 2 plus 2 equals 5 million? Well, most would say 5 because it's closer to the real answer, 4. But if there was no real answer, 4, to compare it to, it wouldn't matter which answer you gave, would it? In the same way, atheists can't point to an absolute unchanging moral law. All they can come up with is their opinion, which really amounts to a lot of hot air. Lawrence accuses creationists of a lack of morality, but in his worldview, morality is determined by the individual. In which case, how can we be morally wrong? The best he could say if his worldview is true is that he doesn't agree with us. So who cares? No one could be teaching anything that was morally wrong because all we would be teaching is our own opinion. And who's to say your opinion is better than mine? It seems people like Lawrence Krauss and Richard Dawkins want to move our society towards some kind of deophobic, atheistic, materialistic worldview where only their faith can be taught. They live in a box called materialism and they don't think outside of it, which is fine. What isn't fine is trying to shove it down other people's throats through indoctrination in our school systems. I mean, seriously. I think using emotive terms like child abuse to attack people that don't believe what you do and forcing your beliefs on others is a little Orwellian, don't you? Atheists like Lawrence believe our existence is totally materialistic and want to use logic to show how creationism doesn't make sense. But logic isn't made of matter. You can't buy a pound of logic down at the store, Lawrence. Where does an unchanging, universal, non-materialistic entity like logic come from in an evolutionary, constantly changing materialistic universe? Lawrence wants to talk about science as if it backs up his belief system. But science is based on the uniformity in the universe. If you couldn't expect conditions to be similar tomorrow to what they are today, why would you conduct experiments? But evolution, constant change, doesn't explain uniformity in nature well at all. Dr. Krauss, before you try arguing against creationists, may I suggest you explain how you can even account for the existence of morality, logic, and science in the first place without God? Christians can't explain all of them according to the God of the Bible. Science is possible because God created an orderly universe, because He's a God of order. Logic is a reflection of how God thinks because it allows right thinking. Morality is absolute because God is righteous and just. You see, unless you start with God, you can't explain how you could have the tools to argue against God. Doesn't it make more sense to teach kids a worldview that can account for why they're here, why life has meaning, and why science is even possible? Why certain behavior is wrong, and why there's a right and wrong way to think about things? Evolution isn't the basis of modern biology. It's the basis of atheism, irrationality, and nihilism. No wonder many people can't get science right when they're taught that explosions, the Big Bang, cause order, random spelling mistakes in DNA, mutations, write the equivalent of sophisticated biological computer code, and the coded information in DNA, in living things, wrote itself with no mind. The last thing we want to do is keep teaching the irrationality of evolution to people as science and fact when there isn't one observable example of one creature turning into another. Facts are observed. The purpose of science education is not to teach make-believe stories about the past, To teach such manifest nonsense with impunity will only damage the healthy future of our society. Technology and biotechnology will be the basis of our economic future. And if we allow nonsense to be promulgated in the schools, we do a disservice to our students, a disservice to our children, and we're guaranteeing that they will fall behind in a competitive world that depends on skilled workforces able to understand and manipulate technology and science. At Creation Ministries International, we advocate the teaching of science and truth. Truth will always offend anyone who clings to error. Don't be offended.